I never thought I'd become the type of person to get tangled up in a dispute with a neighbor, especially not with the HOA Homeowners Association in the neighborhood. My name is Ethan Carter, a 35-year-old programmer who mostly works from home. I like keeping to myself, maintaining a neat lawn, and trying to be a decent neighbor. My house is in Willow Creek, a small suburb near Atlanta, Georgia, a place with cute red brick homes, shady maple trees, and quiet streets that I chose to escape the hustle of San Francisco after years of living there. I've been here for 3 years, and at first everything was perfect. The house I bought came with a garage that the previous owner had converted into a workspace with big windows, ideal for my remote job. I set up my desk by the window, added a few small cactus pots to fill the space, and still had enough room to park my sedan inside. In the backyard, I have a separate covered carport, big enough to fit another car if needed. I love this setup, a quiet workspace, and no worries about my car baking in the sun or rain. To me, it's a perfect little corner for coding, listening to podcasts, and enjoying the peace I've always craved. Willow Creek is a pleasant neighborhood, with well-trimmed lawns and houses that look like they stepped out of a painting, but the HOA here is a different story. They have too much free time and a pile of nitpicky rules: what color your walls can be, how your trees should look, even what kind of trash cans you can use. When I first bought the house, I didn't pay much attention. The garage conversion permit was legally approved, the carport was on my property, and I always paid my dues on time. I figured as long as I didn't stir up trouble, everything would be fine. I just wanted to live quietly, tend to my cacti, and stay out of drama. 3 years passed smoothly. I kept my lawn tidy, nodded hello to the dog walkers passing by, and rarely socialized beyond small talk. Mornings, I'd brew coffee and work by the window with soft sunlight, then water my plants in the backyard in the afternoons. My life was simple, just how I liked it. I had no idea things would change because of a new neighbor, Linda Baxter. She moved into the house next door, bringing her shiny white SUV with the license plate Linda B, and an attitude that soon made me realize my peace was under threat. 6 months after she arrived, Linda got elected to the HOA board, and that's when the trouble started. But for now, sitting in my garage office with a coffee mug in hand, I still didn't know that my beloved carport would soon become the center of a battle I never wanted. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. Linda Baxter came into my life like a strange breeze, and it didn't take long for me to realize it wasn't the cool, refreshing kind I'd hoped for in Willow Creek. She's about 55, with short blonde hair that gets sharper every week, like each haircut is a new power statement. Her white SUV is always spotless, parked neatly in the driveway next door, its personalized Linda B license plate screaming who she is. When we first met, she introduced herself as Mrs. Baxter with a stiff handshake, then told me to call her Linda like we'd been buddies forever. I just nodded, gave a weak smile, and figured as long as she didn't bother me, we'd be fine. But Linda isn't the type to let things stay peaceful. 6 months after moving in, she got elected to the HOA board, and that's when I started feeling her presence more sharply. Our first run-in happened one morning, while I was watering my little cactus pots on the porch. Linda strolled over, phone in hand like she was ready to snap pictures, and said in a syrupy voice that made me cringe. I froze, staring at the tiny harmless pots, and replied, "I didn't know there was a list. They're not bothering anyone." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Oh, it's not a bother, just that we have to keep a common standard. Could you move them to the backyard?" I didn't want trouble, so I nodded and hauled the pots out back. I thought that'd be the end of it, but no. A few weeks later, I got a text from Linda at 7 a.m., right after the trash truck passed. "Ethan, your bin's still out on the street. Rules say it's gotta be put away within 30 minutes of pickup, you know." I sighed, grabbed a jacket, and trudged out to stow the bin, even though it'd been out less than an hour. I told myself to just comply and keep the peace, but I was starting to get annoyed. Linda seemed to have way too much time for these petty things. Then came the mailbox issue. One day, I was in my garage office, coding away, when I heard a knock. Linda stood there, holding a printed HOA sheet, flashing a fake smile. "Ethan, your green mailbox is a bit too bold. We've got rules about neutral colors to keep the neighborhood harmonious. Could you repaint it?" I looked at her, then at the paper with its bolded community aesthetics line, and just nodded to get it over with. I didn't want to argue, even though I thought my pale green mailbox wasn't hurting anyone's property value. I bought gray paint, redid the mailbox that weekend, and told myself that it'd be the last time I'd give in. But with Linda, there's no such thing as the last time. She always found something to nitpick. Once it was the bird feeder I hung in the backyard. She said it attracted unwanted wildlife. Another time, a package sat on my porch too long because I was stuck in an online meeting, and she texted right away, "Ethan, you need to bring that package in sooner, it doesn't look nice." Each time, I'd get a printed notice in my mailbox, a long-winded text, or sometimes that chillingly sweet voice over the phone. "Ethan, we all have to follow the rules, right? I'm just doing my job." I stayed calm, handled each thing one by one, and tried to avoid a direct clash. But deep down, I knew Linda Baxter wasn't going to leave me alone, and I was right. I'd tried to keep the peace with Linda Baxter, but some days my patience was tested to the limit. One rainy morning in Willow Creek, I was in my garage office, headphones on, focused on an important online meeting with a client. Rain pounded outside, tapping steadily on the windows, a soothing background noise I've always liked. I'd just started explaining some code when a loud car horn blared from the backyard, cutting through my thoughts. I tried to ignore it, thinking someone hit it by mistake, but it kept going, relentless, for 5 minutes straight. My client frowned on the screen, and I had to apologize, mute myself, and get up to see what was happening. I grabbed an umbrella, opened the back door, and stepped out into the downpour. Right under my carport, there was Linda's shiny white SUV with the Linda B plate, parked like it owned the place, and Linda sat inside, honking non-stop, staring at me through the windshield. I approached, rain splashing off the umbrella, onto my sleeves, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Linda, what's going on? Why are you parked here?" She cracked her window, just enough to talk without letting rain in, and replied in that fake sweet tone I knew too well. "Ethan, my street's flooded. I don't want this car ruined by water. Your carport's empty, so I figured you wouldn't mind if I used it for a bit." I blinked, stunned by her logic. "Linda, this is my carport, private property. You can't just park here without asking." I glanced around. My car was in the main garage because I'd brought groceries in before the rain hit, leaving the carport free for the moment. But free doesn't mean public. Linda sighed, the kind of sigh meant to sound patient with a slow kid. "This flooding's an emergency, Ethan. I just need a dry spot for a while. Move your car out of the garage, I'll park there to stay dry." I stood there, rain dripping off the umbrella, feeling my blood rise. "No, Linda," I said, firmer than I meant to, "I'm in a meeting and this is my property. You can't use it, temporarily or otherwise, without permission. Please move your car." Her face stiffened, the fake smile gone. She stared at me, silent for about 30 seconds, long enough for the tension to thicken, then said, "I'll report this to the HOA board. We should have rules for emergencies like this. You're really uncooperative, Ethan." Then she hit the gas, deliberately swerving through a big puddle, splashing mud all over my shoes and pants before speeding off. I watched her white SUV disappear around the corner, wet and pissed, but still trying to stay calm for my meeting. I wiped my shoes, changed pants, and apologized to my client for an unexpected interruption. But in my head, I knew it wasn't over. That night, as I ate dinner, a simple plate of pasta I'd made, my email pinged. I opened it, and sure enough, it was from the HOA, titled, "Proposed Amendment to Community Parking Rules for Emergencies." It demanded residents with extra parking let neighbors use it in bad weather. Contact person, Linda Baxter. I read it over and over, unable to believe how fast she'd turned her personal excuse into an official rule. I took a sip of water, set my phone down, and told myself I had to do something before Linda turned my favorite carport into the neighborhood's communal lot. After the rainy carport incident, I got more cautious with Linda Baxter. I knew she wasn't the type to back off, and that HOA email about emergency rules was just the beginning. I'd forwarded it to Sarah Nguyen, a lawyer friend from college, to get her take. She texted back fast, "They can't force you to open private property to others, Ethan, don't worry, stay cool." I breathed easier, thinking I could handle this if Linda kept pushing, but I didn't expect how far she'd go. That weekend, I drove to the store for some stuff: coffee, pasta, random odds and ends. The sky was clear, no trace of the earlier rain, and I left the main garage door open to air it out a bit before getting back to work. When I got home, I nearly dropped my bags at the sight. Linda's white SUV, with the Linda B plate, was parked smack in my main garage, not the backyard carport, but the garage where I park and work. The roll-up door was still wide open, and Linda was nowhere around. I stood there a minute, trying to process it, then went in to check. On the inner door to the house, I found a note taped up, written in neat handwriting: "Ethan, I had an urgent HOA meeting. My driveway's being repaved, no parking there, so I used your garage since you weren't home. Thanks for understanding, Linda." I read it, my hand crumpling the paper. A hot surge ran up my spine. Linda hadn't just parked without asking, she'd gotten into my garage, a space I consider the most private part of my home. I set the bags on the kitchen floor, took deep breaths to stay calm, then remembered something. During an HOA inspection months back, Linda had asked for the garage door code to check exterior wiring. I'd given it to her, thinking it was a one-time thing. Now I knew what she'd kept it for. I couldn't believe Linda's nerve. I went to the garage, stared at her gleaming white SUV, taking up my spot, and decided to act. First, I changed the code on the outdoor keypad right then, entering a new sequence I was sure Linda couldn't guess. Then I went inside, found the manual override button for the roll-up door, the emergency one in the garage, and pulled the battery to disable it. I didn't want her opening it anyway, code or not. Done. I grabbed my phone and texted Linda short and sharp: "I see you parked in my garage without permission. Code's changed. Please contact me when you're back to discuss this privacy violation." I sent it, then sat on the couch, phone still in hand, waiting. 3 hours later, Linda texted, "Ethan, I need my car. Open the garage now." I read it, feeling like she didn't even grasp what she'd done wrong. I waited 15 minutes on purpose, to make her sweat a bit, then replied, "I'm in a meeting, I'll be free in an hour. Going forward, don't enter my property or use my garage without clear permission." I wasn't really in a meeting, just sitting there with a cold glass of water, watching the clock, wondering how she'd react. 10 minutes later, my doorbell started ringing non-stop. I checked the security camera, installed after the rainy carport fiasco, and saw Linda on my porch, jabbing the bell, talking into her phone with a pissed-off look. I smirked faintly, thinking I'd let her wait a little longer. With Linda, I knew this wouldn't be the last time she tested my boundaries, but this time, I wasn't giving in easy like before. I sat in the living room, watching Linda Baxter on the security camera, her fingers still hammering the doorbell like she wanted to drill through my front door. The bell rang in steady bursts, mixed with her muttering something into her phone, probably complaining to someone about me holding her car hostage. I counted to 30 in my head, keeping calm, even though I was starting to heat up inside, then got up and opened the door. Linda had been waiting nearly half an hour, and when I appeared, she looked ready to pop. Face flushed, blonde hair mussed by the wind, she stepped closer than necessary, voice shrill. "Ethan, this is ridiculous. I've been waiting almost an hour. I have an important appointment, and you're holding my car like it's a prisoner. I could call the cops over this." I leaned lightly against the doorframe, keeping my tone even. "Call the cops for what, Linda? For you entering my garage without permission? For using a code I gave you for an HOA inspection to park in my private space without asking? If anyone should call the cops, it's me." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to push back so hard. Linda crossed her arms, lips pursed tight, then shot back, "It was an emergency. My driveway's being worked on, I couldn't park on the street. You have to understand." I shook my head. "No, Linda, that's not an emergency. It's scheduled maintenance you knew about, and you could have called a rideshare or gotten a lift to your meeting. You don't get to barge onto my property and use that as an excuse." She stared at me, eyes narrowing like she was figuring out her next move. I took the chance, stepping forward a bit, voice still calm, but firm. We need to set some boundaries. Do you get that what you did was wrong, and invaded my privacy? Linda crossed her arms tighter, her face reddening like she might blow steam. I could almost see the frustration in every wrinkle on her forehead. For someone who prided herself on controlling everything in Willow Creek, being forced to admit a mistake was obviously more than she could handle. Finally, she huffed through gritted teeth, "Fine, I should have asked before using your garage. Now open it, I'm late." It wasn't a real apology, just a grudging line to get out of the mess, but I knew that was Linda's limit. I nodded, pulled out my phone to open the roll-up door via the app. I'd set it up after the carport rain mess for better control. But before I hit the button, I looked at her. "I need you to delete the old code from your phone right now, it doesn't work anymore. But I want to be sure you don't keep it." Linda frowned, obviously hating being told what to do, but she finally grabbed her phone, opened her notes app, and deleted a string of numbers in front of me. I checked the screen, it was the old code, then hit the button. The roll-up door lifted slowly, the motor's hum cutting through the tense silence between us. Linda brushed past me without another word, practically jogging to her white SUV. She started it, revved the engine harder than needed, and backed out of the garage fast enough that I worried she'd hit the fence. I stood there watching Linda B vanish around the corner, tires squealing on the wet pavement, and let out a long breath. I'd won this round, but I still felt uneasy. Linda wasn't one to give up easy, and the way she left, no thank you, no proper sorry, told me she'd find a way to get back at me. I closed the garage, double-checked the keypad code, and went inside. Sitting on the couch with a cold glass of water, I replayed the afternoon. I didn't want things to escalate this far, but Linda had forced me to get tough. I texted Sarah, giving her a quick rundown, and asking what I should prep for, if Linda kept at it. Sarah replied, "Keep all evidence, texts camera footage. She's got no case if she pushes further." I nodded at the screen, telling myself to stay ready. Linda might be on the HOA board, but I wasn't letting her turn my home into her playground. After the confrontation with Linda Baxter, I thought I'd set a clear boundary. I was wrong. The next morning, as I finished brewing my coffee and sat down at my desk in the garage, I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked out the window and saw a neighborhood delivery person, not an official mail carrier, but someone the HOA hired to distribute notices. I opened the front door, grabbed a thick paper envelope from the mailbox, and the moment I saw the HOA seal on it, I knew trouble was coming. I tore it open and read the bolded text. "Notice the garage conversion at Mr. Ethan Carter's address does not comply with current regulations. Please restore the garage to its original function within 30 days. At the bottom was Linda Baxter's signature. As HOA board member, I stood there, holding the paper, feeling like I'd been punched in the face. This wasn't a coincidence. My garage had been legally approved by the previous owner, the permit was in the documents I got when I bought the house, and in 3 years the HOA had never mentioned an issue. Clearly this was Linda's retaliation for last night, when I locked her car in and forced her to admit her mistake. I sat on the couch, reread the notice, and realized Linda didn't just want to make things difficult, she wanted to force me to dismantle my favorite workspace. I took a sip of my now cold coffee, then texted Sarah Nguyen. "Linda just sent a notice demanding I restore the garage. This is retaliation, can you help?" Sarah called back immediately, her voice as calm as ever. "Ethan, send me that notice and your house permit right now. If the conversion was approved before, they can't retroactively enforce rules to make you change it. This is clear harassment." I dug through my drawer for the house documents, snapped photos of the permit, and sent everything to Sarah. While waiting for her to review, I checked the security camera. Nothing unusual, but I saved the footage of Linda knocking on my door last night as evidence. Sarah texted back after 20 minutes, "Just as I thought, your permit is valid, and the rule they're citing doesn't apply to prior conversions. I'll draft a response to the board, not just Linda, so they know you're not an easy target." I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling more secure with Sarah backing me up. She sent me a draft letter by noon, a concise but sharp document, citing Georgia property laws and legal precedents about HOAs not being able to apply new rules to approved conversions. The letter ended with a polite but pointed line: "We hope the board will reconsider this notice to avoid unnecessary legal action." I read it, smiled, and told Sarah to send it directly to the entire HOA board via their official email. I wanted Linda to know I wasn't just pushing back against her, I was ready to take this further if needed. But deep down, I was still worried. Linda wasn't the type to stay quiet after a letter. She had power on the board, and that fake sweet voice of hers always hid a stubbornness I'd never seen in anyone else. I sat in the garage, looking at my cactus pots on the windowsill, and wondered if I should add a lock to the backyard carport too. I didn't want to live in constant vigilance like this, but Linda had made me rethink the peace I'd once cherished in Willow Creek. That evening, I ate dinner alone, a plate of pasta with tomato sauce, and tried to focus on a coding project to take my mind off things. But as I finished washing dishes, my phone buzzed with a new email from the HOA. I opened it, and my heart sank a bit. Linda wasn't stopping, she'd just sent a supplemental notice to the board, requesting an emergency meeting to review my ongoing violations. I texted Sarah right away: "She's at it again." I knew this fight wasn't over, and Linda Baxter wasn't going to let me off easily. I'd hoped Sarah's letter to the HOA board would make Linda Baxter back off, but I underestimated her stubbornness. A few days later, I got a reply email from the HOA, not from Linda, but from another member, saying they'd review my letter at the next meeting. I thought I'd at least have some time to breathe, but Linda clearly had no intention of waiting. One weekend afternoon, I left the garage door open while carrying bags of fertilizer from my car to the backyard to tend to my cacti. I was gone for less than 15 minutes, but when I returned, I saw the white SUV with the Linda B plate parked right in my garage again. This time, there was no note taped to the door, no text, nothing, just Linda's pure audacity. I stood there, fertilizer bag still in hand, staring at the shiny white car taking up my space. Anger surged, but I took a deep breath to keep my head clear. Linda wasn't around, probably off at another HOA meeting or something, but this time, I decided I wouldn't let her get away with it so easily. I set the bags down, checked the security camera. The footage showed Linda driving in, stepping out as casually as if it were her own house, then walking down the street without even glancing at my place. I shook my head, unable to believe she could be so nonchalant after everything that had happened. I knew what I had to do. I drove to the hardware store near Willow Creek, bought a heavy-duty padlock and a metal bar. Back home, I installed the bar on the inside of the garage roll-up door, securing it with the padlock so no one could open it from the outside, code or not. I double-checked the door to make sure it was solid, then sat on the couch with a cup of tea, positioning myself where I could see the street through the window. I wanted to see Linda's reaction when she came back and realized her car was locked in again. This wasn't just about protecting my property, it was my way of telling her I wasn't playing around. About 2 hours later, I saw Linda appear at the end of the street, phone in hand, walking with her usual confident stride. She went to the keypad outside the garage, typed in a code, probably the old one she still remembered, despite deleting it in front of me last time, and frowned when the door didn't budge. She tried again, typing slower this time, but still nothing. I sipped my tea, stifling a laugh. Linda pulled out her phone, tapped something, maybe checking if she'd remembered the code right, then walked to my front door and rang the bell. I counted to 30 in my head, like last time, then got up and opened the door with a fake look of surprise. "Linda, what's up?" Her fake smile looked more forced than ever. "Ethan, the garage door seems to be broken. I need to get my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Your car's in my garage again, without permission, after our last talk." Her face stiffened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I was in a rush, and you weren't home. I figured you wouldn't mind if I used it for a few hours since the door was already open." I shook my head. "No, Linda, we've been over this. You're trespassing on my property, again. I'm not okay with that." She let out a huff. "I don't have time to argue. Open the door now. The meeting ran late, and I need to get home." I gave a small smile, keeping my voice calm. "I've put a padlock on the inside of the door, for security reasons, after someone kept coming in without permission." You understand, right? I'll open it tomorrow morning, around 9. Linda nearly shouted, tomorrow morning, that's insane. I need my car now. I shrugged. I also need you to respect my property and privacy, but clearly that's not happening. This is just a natural consequence. Want to call the police? I've got cameras, texts, and a lawyer ready. Linda stared at me, eyes blazing, then turned on her heel, and stormed off, muttering something I couldn't hear. I closed the door, went back to the couch, and felt a cold determination. Linda might retaliate, but I was ready to push back. This game, I'd play it to the end. After locking Linda Baxter's car in again, I knew she wouldn't let it slide. I went to bed with a mix of satisfaction and anxiety, wondering what her next move would be. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and at exactly 9 a.m., I heard a car pull up out front. I looked out the window, and saw not just Linda, but two others, James Holt, an older man with white hair I'd met at a few HOA meetings, and Clara Evans, a younger woman who'd recently moved to the neighborhood and joined the board. Linda led the way, her face stern, clearly having brought allies to pressure me. I took a deep breath, opened the app on my phone to unlock the padlock inside the garage, then stepped out to the front porch to greet them. Good morning, I said, trying to sound cheerful, right on time. Linda didn't respond, just crossed her arms, and gave me a cold stare. James stepped forward, offering an awkward smile. Ethan, we're board members, here to witness the situation and make sure there's no more misunderstanding. I nodded. Great. It's always good to have witnesses when dealing with improper behavior. I've opened the garage door. She can take her illegally parked car anytime. I pressed the button on my phone, and the sound of the roll-up door hummed behind them, slowly revealing Linda's white SUV. James and Clara turned to look, while Linda stood still, her face reddening. I took the chance to speak up. Let me clarify the situation. Linda has repeatedly trespassed on my property, parking in my garage without permission, using an old code to get in without asking, and retaliating with false notices when I objected. I have cameras, texts, and a lawyer reviewing everything. James raised an eyebrow, turning to Linda. You parked in his garage without permission, more than once. Linda waved her hand, her voice rising. It was an emergency. He's blowing everything out of proportion, and retaliating, by locking my car in. I shook my head. No, I'm protecting my property, after repeated trespassing. Her parking here again without asking, is her fault, not mine. Clara frowned, looking at Linda. You told us he agreed to let you park temporarily, then locked your car to make things difficult. This sounds different. Linda's face flushed, her voice shaky. He's twisting the truth. I left a note last time. I shot back. A note isn't permission, and this time, there was nothing. She just parked, and left. I have cameras to prove it. James rubbed his chin, looking uncomfortable, then spoke up. Linda, go get your car for now. Maybe we should continue this discussion at the community center, instead of standing in Ethan's yard. Linda looked at James like she wanted to argue, but finally turned, walking quickly to her SUV. She opened the door, slammed it hard enough for the sound to echo from my porch, then backed out fast enough that Clara had to jump aside to avoid getting hit. Linda sped off, tires squealing on the pavement, and I stood there, feeling like I'd just survived a small battle. James turned to me, his voice softer. Ethan, Linda mentioned some conflicts between you two. Maybe we should sit down and talk as neighbors. I nodded. I'm always open to talking civilly, but Linda needs to stop trespassing on my property and using her HOA position to retaliate. I have enough evidence if we need to clear things up. Clara gave a small nod, like she was thinking it over, while James sighed. All right, we'll look into it. Thanks for cooperating. They said goodbye and left, leaving me on the porch with mixed feelings. Linda might have lost some ground with James and Clara, but I knew she wouldn't stop. She'd brought the board into this, and I needed to prepare for her next move, probably a bigger meeting where she'd try to paint me as the bad guy. I went back inside, texted Sarah. The board just came by. Things are about to get bigger. I was right. Linda Baxter didn't stop after James and Clara witnessed the truth. A few days after they left my house, an official HOA notice appeared in my email inbox. An emergency meeting was scheduled for the next evening at the Willow Creek Community Center, with the main agenda being parking violations and property use restrictions. Linda's signature sat prominently at the bottom, and I knew this was her next play. She wanted to make me a public target, but I wasn't about to let her win easily. I texted Sarah right away. Linda called an emergency meeting. I need you to come with me. Sarah agreed, and we started preparing. That evening, I walked into the community center with Sarah by my side, carrying a thick folder copies of the garage permit, camera footage of Linda parking without permission, her unreasonable texts, and the response letter Sarah had sent the board. Linda sat at the front table, wearing a pale blue blazer, her blonde hair perfectly styled, looking at me with a mix of surprise and anger when she saw Sarah. I sat in the middle row, keeping a calm demeanor, while Sarah whispered, "Let her dig her own grave. We've got enough evidence." James Holt, who was chairing the meeting, tapped his pen on the table to start, while Clara Evans sat beside him, taking notes. Linda stood up first, her voice sweet but dramatic. "Dear residents, we're here to discuss community standards. Some individuals, like Ethan Carter, have been uncooperative, refusing to help neighbors in need, and even causing trouble by locking a board member's car. I propose we review our rules to ensure harmony." She looked at me, flashing a fake smile, as if playing the neighborhood hero. I glanced at Sarah, who gave a small nod, and I stood up, raising my hand to speak. "Let me clarify," I began, my voice steady but firm. "Linda has repeatedly trespassed on my private property, parking in my garage without permission, using an old code to get in without asking, and retaliating with false notices when I asked her to stop. I have proof right here." I held up the folder, then passed out copies to the residents around the room, clips of Linda driving into my garage, her texts, and the notice to restore my garage, despite its valid approval. Murmurs filled the room, as people flipped through the pages. Linda's face turned red, her voice rising. "This meeting is about parking, not personal attacks." But James raised a hand to cut her off. "No, Linda, this meeting is about community concerns, and what Ethan's presenting is directly related to your claims." I continued, "She hasn't just done this to me. If anyone else has been unfairly targeted with rules or retaliatory notices, please speak up." An older man in the corner, I recognized him as Tom from down the street, stood up. "Linda fined me for leaving my bike in the yard overnight, even though I'd just fixed it." Another woman added, "She sent me a notice because my dog barked, even though it only barked when she walked by." The room's atmosphere shifted. Linda faltered, trying to defend herself. "I'm just doing my job." But Clara looked at her, her voice low. "Linda, you said Ethan was uncooperative, but the evidence shows you've been violating his privacy repeatedly. Why didn't you tell us the full story?" Linda stammered, unable to respond, and James sighed. "I think we need to reassess how the board operates." "Thank you, Ethan, for clarifying. We'll vote on board positions at the next meeting." The meeting ended on a heavy note. Linda left first, her head down, while I felt relieved seeing residents starting to side with me. A week later, at the official meeting, Linda was voted off the board by a landslide. James was elected the new chair, promising to run things more fairly. Linda went quiet after that, and 3 weeks later, I saw a for sale sign in front of her house. The day she moved out, I stood on my porch, watching the Linda B drive away from Willow Creek for good. I gave a small wave. She nodded coldly, and that was that. When Linda Baxter left Willow Creek, I felt a gentle breeze return to the neighborhood, like the strange wind that brought trouble had finally dissipated. The white SUV, with the Linda B plate, rolled out of her driveway, for the last time, and I stood on my porch, watching. Our eyes met briefly through the car window. I gave a small wave, not to be friendly, but as a closure to our story. She nodded coldly, lips pursed, then hit the gas, and disappeared around the corner. I went back inside, closed the door, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. Life in Willow Creek slowly returned to how it was before Linda arrived. James Holt, as the new HOA chair, started reforming things. He emailed residents, pledging to cut back on excessive rules, and listen to everyone's input. I didn't join the board officially, but James stopped by once to ask my thoughts on avoiding repeats of the Linda drama. I suggested adding a clear rule about respecting private property, and he nodded. "Good idea, Ethan. We need a board that supports, not controls." Clara Evans became friendlier too. She brought over a plate of homemade cookies to thank me for speaking up at the meeting, and we chatted for a bit about the neighborhood. I removed the padlock from the garage door a few days after Linda left. I didn't need it anymore. The sense of safety was back, though I kept the security cameras. The footage of Linda parking without permission was now just a memory, a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for the peace you want. The garage remained my favorite spot. I'd sit there every morning, brew coffee, look out the big window to the backyard, and code to the sound of chirping birds. I brought the cactus pots back to the porch, and no one complained about them anymore. I repainted my mailbox pale green like before, and this time, it stood there without a single HOA notice to bother it. One afternoon, I decided to invite James, Clara, and a few neighbors like Tom over for dinner, a simple meal of pasta and wine. We sat in the backyard, under the carport now clearly marked with a small sign I made, for homeowner use only. Everyone laughed and shared stories about Linda's overreaches, from finding Tom's bike to sending notices about barking dogs. Clara said her leaving was the best thing for the neighborhood. James nodded. Thanks to you, Ethan, we realized the board needed to change. I just smiled, raising my glass. I just wanted to live in peace, but sometimes peace needs protecting. After everyone left, I stood alone in the garage, holding a small watering can, tending to the cacti on the windowsill. I thought about Linda, the months of stress she brought, and realized something: she might be gone, but her shadow left a lesson. Willow Creek was a better place now, not because Linda left, but because those of us who stayed, stood together against her unreasonable control. The HOA was no longer a source of dread, with notices and silly rules. It became a place for neighbors to support each other, as it should be. I set the watering can down, looked out at the backyard, through the window, where the sunset painted the maple trees golden. I smiled, thinking I'd finally reclaimed the quiet I came to Willow Creek for. Linda Baxter might have tried to turn this place into her battlefield, but in the end, she only helped us see the value of respecting each other. I turned off the garage light, stepped inside the house, and closed the door, knowing that from now on, I could live the way I wanted, no one parking in my space without permission anymore. The story of Ethan Carter and Linda Baxter in the Willow Creek suburb reflects a common reality in the U.S. Today. The tension between individual rights and community pressure, especially in neighborhoods with HOAs, homeowners associations. In America, HOAs are often created to maintain property values and neighborhood aesthetics, but in many cases, they become tools for people like Linda, a classic HOA Karen, to abuse power and impose their personal will. Linda parking in Ethan's garage without permission, citing emergencies, like flooded streets or driveway repairs, and retaliating with HOA notices when denied, mirrors a real trend in American society. Some people exploit communal rules to control others, disregarding privacy, a value deeply cherished in U.S. culture. Ethan, with his initial patience, moving the cacti, repainting the mailbox, but eventual firmness, locking Linda's car, involving lawyer Sarah, represents how many Americans handle such intrusions, conceding up to a point, then fighting back when pushed too far. The lesson from this story isn't just about protecting personal space, it's about handling conflict in a modern community. Learn from Ethan, keep evidence, cameras, texts, seek support Sarah, James, Clara, and persist in dialogue instead of letting emotions take over. In today's America, where social media amplifies disputes and HOAs sometimes overstep, don't be afraid to speak up when treated unfairly, like Ethan did at the meeting, which got Linda voted off the board. At the same time, the story reminds us to build relationships with neighbors, the dinner at the end, to create collective strength, rather than letting Linda manipulate things. Life in the U.S. values individual freedom, but it also demands you're ready to defend it smartly and calmly. If you enjoyed the story of how Ethan protected his garage from Linda, and want to see more American neighborhood drama, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for following this journey, and see you soon for more lessons from Willow Creek.